He slept without clothes, and a wild frontier girl claimed him forever. The young man rode his worn-out horse along the narrow, dusty trail that wound through the frontier lands. The sun had just dipped low, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. He pulled his coat tighter around him, though it offered little protection against the chill that crept into the valley. His journey had been long and hard. He had left everything familiar behind, a small town that offered no future, a family he could not support, and memories that seemed heavier with every passing day. He had been searching for work, for a place to rest, and for a life that might offer more than endless struggle. The frontier was harsh, unpredictable, and lonely, but it promised freedom. It promised a chance to start over, and he clung to that hope like a lifeline. By the time he reached the small settlement, the sky was already dark. The town was little more than a cluster of wooden cabins and rough-hewn shops, set against the backdrop of rolling hills and dense forests. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the faint glow of lanterns flickered along the narrow paths. The air smelled of wood smoke, animals, and earth, raw, unpolished, and alive. He guided his horse toward a stable at the edge of town, hoping to find someone willing to give him shelter for the night. The stable was simple, filled with hay and the low hum of restless animals. A man inside nodded at him, barely lifting his head.
"You're new," the man said gruffly. "You can put your horse over there and sleep if you like."
Nothing fancy, though. The young man nodded and dismounted. His legs were stiff, and his back ached from riding all day. He tended to the horse quickly, brushing its coat and offering it water. The animal nuzzled him gratefully, and for a brief moment he felt a sense of connection, a reminder that he wasn't entirely alone in this wide, unforgiving world. Once the horse was settled, he stepped outside the stable to look for a place to rest himself. There were a few cabins that seemed occupied, their windows glowing warmly. But he hesitated. He did not want to intrude. He wanted a place where he could be unseen, where no one would judge or question him. He had grown accustomed to moving quietly through life, keeping himself small and unnoticed. Here, in this wild land that had become a habit, almost a survival skill. The night grew colder as he wandered to the edge of the settlement, where the trees began to thin and the hills rose in gentle slopes. He found a small clearing beside a creek, the water sparkling under the pale light of the moon. The sound of the water was soothing, almost hypnotic, and he sank onto a patch of soft grass. He let out a long breath, feeling the tension in his body ease for the first time that day. The frontier was beautiful in its own harsh way. The stars above were bright, unfiltered by city lights, and the silence of the night was almost sacred. For a man who had spent most of his life running, this solitude was a comfort. Exhausted beyond reason, he decided he would sleep right there, in the open air. There was no one around, and the night was quiet except for the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant cry of an owl. He removed his coat and boots, leaving them carefully folded beside him. He lay back on the grass, feeling the earth beneath him, cold but strangely grounding. The wind carried the scent of pine and damp soil, and for a moment he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He closed his eyes, letting sleep come over him like a wave, his mind drifting away from the worries of survival, work, and the uncertain future that awaited him in the morning. He had no idea how long he slept. Hours must have passed, though the frontier night seemed timeless. When he opened his eyes, the moon had climbed higher, casting silver light across the clearing. He felt the cool breeze and shivered, realizing he had fallen asleep without more than a thin layer of clothing. Normally he would have felt exposed, nervous, or embarrassed, but exhaustion and the solitude of the frontier had dulled those concerns. Here, away from judgment, he could simply exist. Then he heard the sound of movement, a soft, careful footstep on the grass. His eyes snapped open. There, emerging from the shadow of the trees, was a figure. She moved with ease and confidence, as if she belonged to this land in a way he could never claim. Her hair was dark, catching the moonlight, and her eyes shone with curiosity. She looked at him not with mockery or ridicule, but with something more complicated, something that made him uneasy and intrigued at the same time. In her eyes he saw intelligence, boldness, and a wild spirit that matched the untamed land around them. He scrambled to sit up, instinctively covering himself. I didn't expect anyone," he stammered. His voice sounded small and uncertain in the quiet night. The girl laughed softly, a sound that was playful but not unkind. "You sleep like you don't belong to anyone," she said. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. On the frontier, every action could be noticed, every mistake could be remembered. Yet, she did not seem angry or judgmental. She simply studied him, tilting her head slightly, as if trying to understand him. I
I travel, he said, unsure what else to say.
I didn't mean to intrude.
You didn't intrude, she replied.
You just sleep like the land itself owns you. Most people hide behind walls. You lie open? It's strange, but honest. The man blinked. He had never thought of himself as honest or brave. Most of the time he felt like a shadow, moving unseen through the world. Yet this girl looked at him with clarity, as if she could see him not as a visitor but as someone who belonged, at least in part, to the same wild frontier that had shaped her. He did not know how to respond. Words felt clumsy, inadequate. For a long moment, they simply watched each other. The creek babbled quietly beside them, and the night seemed to stretch infinitely. He could feel his pulse, the nervous energy of being noticed so fully, so immediately. She moved closer, crouching on the edge of the clearing, careful not to step too near. She smelled of smoke and earth, a scent that was at once unfamiliar and comforting. "You should cover yourself," she said finally, pointing at the thin blanket he had left folded. "The night is cold." He nodded, pulling the cloth around his shoulders. There was something in her tone, protective but not demanding, that made him relax slightly. He was not used to people caring in this way. On the frontier, people survived, or they did not. Affection and concern were rare, almost luxuries. "I'm called Sam," he said finally. "I just arrived. Looking for work, I guess." "Call me Lila," she said. "I've lived here all my life. I know these hills and forests better than anyone. If you're looking for work, you'll need to be ready for hard days and long nights. The land doesn't forgive laziness." He smiled faintly, grateful for her honesty. "I can handle it," he said. "I'll see," she replied with a small grin. Then, after a pause, she added, "Most people wouldn't lie out like that where anyone could see. You're different." Her words made him uneasy and thoughtful at the same time. Different. That was not a word he had hoped to be called. In the towns he had left behind, being different meant trouble. But here, in the frontier, being different seemed to carry a strange kind of respect. His horse neighed softly, and he walked over to check on it, brushing the horse's coat as he thought. He had no idea how he would face Lila today. Would she return? Would she treat him with the same curiosity? Or would she disappear into the wild, leaving him alone again? While he pondered, he heard movement through the grass. A figure approached quickly, light on her feet but deliberate, and before he could react, Lila appeared in the clearing. "Good morning," she said brightly, a hint of mischief in her tone. "You look like you survived the night without freezing." "I did," Sam replied, trying to sound casual, though he felt a little embarrassed. The stars were beautiful, though. The cold was not. Lila laughed, a sound full of energy. Most people would have stayed inside, hiding from the night. You slept open to it. You are brave, or maybe foolish. Maybe both, Sam said with a small smile. There was something about Lila's presence that made him feel awake, alert, as if the world itself had sharpened around him. She didn't seem to see him as weak or strange. She simply accepted him. You need work, she said suddenly, cutting through the conversation. The town won't take you seriously if you look like a traveler wandering without purpose. Come, I'll show you some things. Sam followed, curious but cautious. Lila moved through the trees and hills like she had no fear, while he struggled to match her pace. She stopped occasionally, pointing out subtle signs of the land, a broken branch that indicated deer nearby, footprints of small animals, patches of berries that were safe to eat. He listened carefully, absorbing everything. She had grown up surviving in this wild frontier, and every movement she made showed confidence, knowledge, and an independence he admired. Do you live alone? Sam asked, trying to start a conversation. Lila paused, her eyes scanning the horizon. Mostly, she said, my family is small. My father died years ago. My mother works in the settlement. And I've learned to rely on myself. The land doesn't wait for anyone. You can either be ready or you don't last. Sam nodded, understanding better why she was so self-assured. Life in towns had taught him rules and safety, but this girl had learned rules of a different kind, rules dictated by survival, instinct, and respect for the land.
You're fast and clever, he said, admiring her movement.
I've never seen anyone move like that through the forest. I have to be, she replied with a grin. There are wolves, snakes, and things you don't want to meet unprepared. You, though, she glanced at him, might survive, but only if you learn quickly. They reached a small clearing where a few logs were stacked neatly beside a fire pit. Lila gestured for Sam to sit, and she produced a small loaf of bread and a bit of cheese from her pack. Eat, she said. You'll need energy if you're going to last the day. You can't survive on the road with an empty stomach. Sam accepted the food gratefully, his fingers brushing hers for a moment. He felt a spark of warmth, not from the sun or the bread, but from the unexpected kindness. He had traveled through many towns, but no one had offered him simple generosity without a hidden agenda. Lila's actions were straightforward, practical, direct, and honest. It was refreshing and unsettling all at once. After they ate, Lila led him to a nearby cabin where she had agreed to help the settlers with chores that day. Sam's hands were stiff from travel, but he worked alongside her, stacking firewood, fetching water, and repairing fences. She guided him patiently, correcting mistakes without belittling him. He noticed how she spoke to animals with calm authority, how she understood their moods and needs, and he realized she treated the world with respect rather than fear. See, she said, wiping sweat from her brow, it's not just about strength. It's about knowing what to do and when. Pay attention, listen, and you'll survive. He watched her closely, noticing her confidence was not arrogance, but knowledge earned through hard experience. He wanted to ask about her childhood, her family, how she had become so capable, but he didn't. She seemed private, shaped by hardship, and he did not want to intrude. Instead, he focused on the tasks at hand, listening carefully to her instructions and learning quickly. As the day passed, Sam realized he was growing tired but also invigorated. Lila moved beside him with ease, carrying heavy loads as though they weighed nothing. She laughed often, a sound that filled the open spaces with energy. He admired her strength and independence, but he also noticed moments when her expression softened, when she paused to look at the horizon, or when she tended to an injured animal. These small gestures revealed a depth that made him even more curious about her. By evening, the settlement buzzed with the preparation for the approaching market day. Merchants set up stalls, children ran laughing through the dirt streets, and farmers returned from fields with their last loads. Sam had completed his first day of work under Lila's guidance, and he felt a mix of exhaustion and pride. He had not just survived, he had contributed, learned, and begun to understand a new way of life. Lila turned to him as they walked back to the clearing. "You did well today," she said, smiling. "Most newcomers would have failed half the tasks. You're slow, but careful." "That's important. Bravery alone won't help you here." Sam nodded, grateful for her words. "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted.
"You could have," she said, shrugging. "But you listened."
"You paid attention. That counts for more than you know." They reached the clearing where he had slept the night before. The fire he had built the previous evening had burned down to embers, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Sam felt a sense of peace as he settled beside it. He had spent much of his life moving, running, avoiding attachments and responsibilities. Here, however, he felt a quiet pull, an awareness that the frontier was not just a place to survive, but a place to belong. Lila crouched beside the fire, her eyes reflecting the glow of the embers. "Tomorrow, I'll take you deeper into the forest," she said. "You need to learn more if you want to survive the long days ahead. Don't be afraid. The forest is wild, but it teaches those who are willing to learn." He looked at her, feeling a mixture of admiration and nervousness. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted. "You'll learn," she replied simply. "Everyone does. Eventually. The question is whether you want to." As night fell, Sam lay down on the grass, gazing at the stars above. The sound of the creek and the gentle whisper of the wind surrounded him. He thought about the strange, fearless girl who had appeared in his life, guiding him without command, challenging him without harshness. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of hope. The frontier was dangerous and unpredictable, but it was also full of opportunity. Opportunity for work, survival, and connection. He closed his eyes, letting the cool night air wash over him. Sleep came slowly at first, his mind turning over the events of the day, but eventually exhaustion claimed him. He dreamt of open fields, of forests alive with birds and animals, and of a girl whose confidence and independence seemed to belong entirely to the wild. When he woke the next morning, he knew that his journey had truly begun. The frontier had tested him, and he had survived. But the lessons and challenges were only starting, and somehow, without words, he knew that Lila would be a part of those lessons, sometimes a guide, sometimes a mystery, but always present in the wild and untamed land that had become his new home. The next day dawned crisp and bright. The sun rose slowly over the hills, casting long shadows across the settlement. Sam woke early, stretching as he listened to the forest come alive with the sound of birds, rustling leaves, and the distant lowing of cattle. The night had been cold, but not unbearable. He had grown accustomed to the chill, and the solitude under the stars had become almost comforting. Yet today felt different. He knew Lila would return, and with her presence came the promise of guidance, challenge, and the unexpected. Sure enough, by mid-morning, he heard the soft, purposeful footsteps he had come to recognize. Lila appeared, carrying a small pack and a quiet confidence that made her seem as much a part of the land as the trees themselves. "Ready?" she asked, a spark of amusement in her eyes. "I think so," Sam replied. "I've never been in the forest this deep before." Good, she said, nodding. You'll need to learn quickly. Out here, mistakes can be costly. He followed her through a narrow path that wound deeper into the woods, the undergrowth thickening around them. Lila moved with ease, ducking under branches and stepping lightly over roots. Sam struggled to keep up, occasionally tripping over rocks or getting tangled in vines. Each time she would glance back and offer a small smile or a nod, encouraging him without scolding. There was no harshness in her guidance, only patience and quiet authority. This land teaches you, she said as they walked, but you have to be willing to listen. You can't just survive by brute strength or stubbornness. You need to see, to understand, and to act with care. Sam nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Life in towns had taught him rules, but the frontier taught something different. Here, every plant, every sound, every movement mattered. Ignoring one detail could lead to failure, or worse. He realized that Lila had not just survived because she was strong. She had survived because she paid attention, because she understood the rhythm of the land and moved in harmony with it. After an hour of walking, they reached a small clearing surrounded by tall oaks and thick brush. Lila gestured for him to stop. "See that?" she asked, pointing to a series of small footprints on the damp earth. Sam knelt down to inspect them. "Rabbit?" he guessed. "Exactly," she said. "But notice the way the dirt is displaced. That tells you which way it ran and how fast. Learning to read signs like this will help you know where animals, people, or danger might be." Sam studied the tracks carefully. He had never paid much attention to such details before, but under Lila's guidance, he began to notice subtle patterns, the way the grass bent, the slight indentations in the soil, the broken twigs. It was as if the land was speaking to him, and for the first time he felt he could understand it, even if only a little. They spent the morning moving from clearing to clearing, practicing tracking small animals and identifying edible plants. Lila shared knowledge that had been passed down to her, teaching him which berries were safe to eat, how to find water, and how to move silently through the forest without alarming wildlife. Sam absorbed everything eagerly, his respect for her growing with each lesson. She was fearless, knowledgeable, and patient, and yet there was a quiet humility about her, a sense that she did not know everything, but what she did know, she used wisely. By midday, they stopped near a stream. The water flowed cool and clear, reflecting the sunlight that filtered through the trees. Lila crouched by the bank and scooped water into her hands, drinking deeply before offering the same to Sam. "Fresh water," she said. "Never take it for granted. It's more valuable than gold out here." Sam drank, feeling the sharp coldness of the water awaken his senses. He realized that every small lesson, every detail she shared, was preparing him not just to survive, but to live. He had come to the frontier seeking work and safety, but he was beginning to understand that survival alone was not enough. He needed skill, observation, and courage. And in Lila, he had found a guide who could teach him all three. They rested briefly, eating small pieces of bread and fruit. Lila talked about the land, her voice carrying a mixture of reverence and humor. She told him stories of storms that had torn through the valley, of animals that had outsmarted hunters, and of people who had tried and failed to make the wilderness bend to their will. Sam listened, fascinated. Her tales were more than entertainment. They were lessons wrapped in stories, warnings disguised as adventures. After their break, they ventured further into the forest, moving carefully along hidden trails and crossing shallow streams. Sam's confidence grew with each step. He was learning to trust his instincts, to observe the world around him, and to act decisively when needed. Lila encouraged him gently. correcting his mistakes without making him feel foolish. There was a rhythm to their movement, a quiet partnership forming between them. "You're improving," Lila said after they had navigated a particularly tricky patch of undergrowth. "You move more like the land wants you to move, rather than fighting against it." Sam smiled, a sense of pride warming him. "I'm learning from the best," he replied.
Maybe, she said with a grin. Or maybe you're just slow to learn.
"Either way, you're making progress, and that's what matters." As afternoon approached, they returned to the edge of the forest, carrying small bundles of firewood and edible plants they had gathered along the way. Sam felt a sense of accomplishment. The day had been exhausting, yet exhilarating. He realized that the frontier was not just a place of danger and isolation. It was a place of growth, challenge, and discovery. Every obstacle they faced together, every lesson Lila taught, strengthened him not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Back at the clearing, Lila prepared a small fire. She worked quickly and efficiently, her movements confident and sure. Sam watched, fascinated by her skill. She handed him a bundle of wood and guided him in tending the flames, teaching him how to control the fire, how to keep it safe, and how to use it for warmth, cooking, and signaling if necessary. "You see," she said, "the frontier doesn't wait for anyone. You need to be ready for everything at all times. Fire, food, water, shelter, they're not luxuries here. They're survival." Sam nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He had spent much of his life in towns, where rules and safety nets existed, and where mistakes were met with correction or punishment. Here, the lessons were immediate, real, and sometimes unforgiving. Yet under Lila's guidance, he felt a growing confidence. He was no longer just a traveler lost in the wilderness. He was learning to belong. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting golden light across the clearing, Lila and Sam sat by the fire, sharing the meal they had prepared. The forest around them was alive with the sounds of evening, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, and the distant calls of nocturnal animals. Sam felt a strange sense of peace. The day had been hard, tiring, and demanding, yet he felt more alive than he had in years. Lila watched him quietly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "You're not like most newcomers," she said softly. "Most would have given up by now, tired of the work, afraid of the land. But you stay. You watch, you learn, and you keep going." "That's rare." Sam looked at her, unsure what to say. He had never considered himself remarkable, only persistent. Yet her words carried weight. He realized that she was not praising him for bravery alone, but for a willingness to adapt, to observe, and to grow. It was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Night fell, and the stars appeared in full splendor above the clearing. Sam lay back on the grass once more, feeling the cool earth beneath him and the warmth of the fire beside him. He thought about the day, the lessons, and the girl who had guided him through the forest. Lila had shown him not just how to survive, but how to observe, understand, and respect the world around him. She had taught him the value of patience, awareness, and quiet strength. As he drifted into sleep, he felt a quiet sense of anticipation. The frontier was vast and full of unknowns, but he no longer felt entirely alone. He had found a guide, a teacher, and a companion in Lila, a girl whose confidence and independence had shown him that survival was more than endurance. It was learning, observing, and growing. For the first time, he felt that the frontier might be more than a place to escape his past. It could be a place to build a future, a place where he could belong, and a place where he could learn not just to survive, but to thrive. And somehow, without fully understanding why, he knew that Lila would be a part of that future, guiding, challenging, and walking beside him as he continued to discover what it meant to live fully in this wild, untamed land. 2. Word count. 305. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Sam woke before the sun, his muscles sore from the previous day's long journey through the forest. Despite the tiredness, there was a quiet excitement in him. Today, Lila had promised to show him something important, something that would test not just his strength, but his awareness and courage. He found her already awake, crouched by the creek that ran past their clearing. She was tossing pebbles into the water, watching the ripples spread with careful attention. When she noticed him, she smiled. "You're up early. Good. Today will be a long day, and you'll need all your energy." "I'm ready," Sam said, standing and stretching. "Good," Lila replied. "But ready isn't enough. Out here, ready means paying attention, thinking ahead, and understanding the land. There's no room for mistakes." They moved into the forest together, deeper than Sam had gone before. The trees grew taller and closer, their thick branches blocking much of the sunlight. The forest floor was uneven, covered in roots and fallen leaves, and the sounds of the wild were more pronounced. The call of birds, the rustle of small animals, and the whisper of the wind through the canopy. Sam followed Lila closely, trying to match her movements, careful not to trip or stumble. "Today you'll learn something important," Lila said, after they had walked for nearly an hour. "You'll learn how to defend yourself, not just with your strength, but with your mind. The forest is full of challenges, and sometimes the greatest danger comes from being unprepared." Sam nodded, though a flicker of nervousness crossed his mind. He had never faced real danger before. Most of his life had been about survival in towns, avoiding trouble and following rules. But the frontier was different. It demanded more. Lila led him to a small clearing where the sunlight broke through the trees in golden streaks. She motioned for him to sit on a fallen log. "Watch carefully," she said. "I want to show you something." From her pack, she pulled a small bundle of rope, a few simple tools, and some sticks. "These are basic, but they can be powerful if you know how to use them," she explained. "Out here, strength alone will not keep you safe. You must think, plan, and act with care." She demonstrated how to set simple traps for small animals, explaining each step with patience. Sam watched intently, trying to remember every detail: the way she anchored the rope, the way she arranged the sticks, the careful placement of bait. When it was his turn, he followed her instructions, fumbling at first but gradually improving. Lila offered corrections without scolding, her voice calm but firm. "You're doing better than I expected," she said after he successfully set a small trap. "Most newcomers give up after the first failure, but you keep trying. That's important. Out here, persistence can save your life." Sam felt a surge of pride. He had never considered himself skilled, yet under Lila's guidance he was learning to accomplish things he had never thought possible. It was both exciting and humbling. As the day went on, they moved through the forest, practicing tracking, identifying plants, and navigating the uneven terrain. Lila explained the importance of reading the land, how the position of the sun could guide them, how animal tracks could reveal danger or opportunity, and how to listen for subtle changes in the environment. Sam absorbed every word, realizing that knowledge, observation, and patience were as crucial as physical strength. By afternoon, they reached a rocky outcrop overlooking a wide valley. The view was breathtaking. rolling hills, scattered trees, and the winding path of a distant river. Lila sat on a rock, gesturing for Sam to join her. "Look at it," she said. "All of this is alive. Every tree, every animal, every path, it has a story. The land teaches those who pay attention. You're learning, but there's still more. You must always respect it, or it will remind you of your mistakes." Sam gazed out at the valley, feeling a mixture of awe and humility. The frontier was vast, untamed, and beautiful, but it was also demanding. He understood that survival here was not just about endurance, it was about respect, awareness, and careful planning. As they prepared to leave, a sudden rustling in the bushes caught Sam's attention. He froze, heart pounding. A small group of wild animals, deer, emerged, startled by their presence. Lila held up her hand, motioning for him to stay still. The deer paused, assessing them, then bounded away gracefully. "You see?" Lila said quietly, a small smile on her face. "The forest is alive. It notices everything. Move with thought, and you will survive. Move without care, and it will remind you quickly." Sam nodded, the lesson sinking deeply into him. The encounter had been brief, yet it had reinforced everything Lila had been teaching him. Survival was not about fear, it was about understanding and respect. As evening approached, they returned to the clearing where they had left their firewood. The day had been long, and Sam felt every muscle ache, but he also felt stronger, more capable, and more aware of the world around him. Lila prepared the fire while he arranged the wood and tended to it under her guidance. The flames crackled and danced, casting warm light across their faces. "You're doing well," she said, her voice calm but approving. "Most newcomers would be exhausted and discouraged by now. You're learning quickly, and that's what counts." Sam looked at her, feeling a sense of gratitude he had never expressed before. "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted quietly. "You could have," Lila replied, shrugging. "But you listened. You observed. That's what matters. Bravery alone won't save you out here." Night fell, and the forest came alive with the sounds of nocturnal animals. Sam lay on the grass, gazing at the stars above. The events of the day swirled in his mind. The lessons, the challenges, and the quiet guidance of the girl who had become his teacher. Lila had shown him that the frontier was not just a place to survive, but a place to grow, learn, and discover strength he never knew he had. As he drifted toward sleep, a sense of anticipation lingered. He knew the frontier would continue to test him, pushing him to adapt, observe, and grow. But he also knew that he was not alone. Lila would be there, guiding him, challenging him, and walking beside him through the wild, untamed land that had become his new home. The next morning brought a new challenge. A group of settlers had arrived in the valley, bringing news that not all newcomers to the frontier were friendly. There had been disputes over land, resources, and survival, and tensions were high. Lila explained that today, Sam would witness the importance of courage, not just physical, but moral and mental. As they approached the settlers, Sam felt a mix of nervousness and determination. Lila moved confidently, introducing him to the group and showing him how to interact with strangers with respect and caution. The settlers were wary, curious, and at times challenging. Sam observed how Lila handled each interaction with skill and patience, never raising her voice, yet asserting her presence and knowledge. "You see," she whispered to him, "the frontier is not just about fighting or surviving the elements. It's about understanding people, reading intentions, and responding wisely. Strength alone will not protect you here." Sam nodded, taking in the lesson. He realized that Lila's guidance extended beyond the forest and the land. It encompassed life itself. Survival required not just skill, but wisdom, patience, and careful observation. Each lesson, each task, each day spent with Lila had shaped him, slowly turning fear and uncertainty into confidence and purpose. Lila appeared at the edge of the clearing, as bright and fearless as ever. Her hair caught the early sunlight, her eyes sparkling with energy and curiosity. She greeted him with her usual confidence. "Ready for today?" she asked. Sam nodded, a quiet smile on his face. "Yes, I feel like I'm finally starting to understand this land. And myself." "That's good," she said, her smile softening. "The frontier isn't just about surviving. It's about learning, adapting, and knowing who you are. You've come a long way." They spent the morning working together, tending to the small clearing they had made their temporary home. Sam moved with a confidence that had been absent just days before. He carried water, stacked firewood, and prepared food, all while learning from Leela's subtle guidance. She observed him, offering advice, correcting mistakes, and occasionally praising his progress. He realized that she had not only been teaching him about the forest, the land, and survival, but also about patience, humility, and trust. By midday, the sun was high and warm, and the forest was alive with sounds. They walked to a nearby hill that overlooked the valley, a place Lila had always visited when she needed perspective. She gestured for Sam to sit beside her. "Look around," she said. "All of this is connected. Every tree, every stream, every path matters. And so do we, in our own way." Sam gazed out over the valley, feeling a sense of wonder and belonging he had never experienced before. The land stretched endlessly, wild and free, and yet he felt as though he had found a place within it. The journey had not been easy. He had faced physical challenges, moments of doubt, and the uncertainty of learning to survive in a place so different from his old life. But now, sitting beside Lila, he understood that the frontier was not just a place of hardship. It was a place of growth, connection, and discovery. "I never thought I could learn so much in such a short time," Sam admitted. "I've been traveling for years, but I've never felt grounded like this before." Lila looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "That's because you were always running," she said softly. "Running from towns, from people, from your past. Here, you can't run. The land won't let you. It teaches you to face things, to adapt, and to grow. You've done that. You've changed." Sam considered her words. She was right. He had come to the frontier seeking work and shelter, trying to escape a life that had left him feeling small and powerless. Instead, he had found challenges, lessons, and something unexpected: connection. Lila had become more than a guide. She had become a companion, a teacher, and someone who had helped him discover his own strength. As the afternoon sun began to lower, they returned to the clearing to prepare for the evening. Sam worked steadily, confident now in his abilities. Lila moved beside him, checking his work and offering guidance. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a quiet partnership that had formed over shared effort, trust, and mutual respect. Later, as the fire crackled and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Lila spoke quietly. "Sam, you've grown a lot since you arrived. You're stronger, wiser, and more capable than you realize. The land has tested you, and you've passed every challenge." "I couldn't have done it without you," Sam replied sincerely. "You've taught me more than I ever expected to learn." "You've taught yourself," she said. "I only guided you. You listened, observed, and acted. That's what made the difference. That's what survival and life requires. They ate in silence for a while, watching the firelight dance across the clearing. Sam felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not just from the work he had completed, but from the realization that he belonged here. The frontier had tested him, shaped him, and ultimately claimed him, not in a harsh or forceful way, but by showing him where he could grow, thrive, and belong. Night fell, and the stars blanketed the sky. Sam lay back on the grass, the cool earth beneath him, and listened to the gentle sounds of the forest. He thought about his journey, from the weary traveler who had arrived days ago to the man who now felt capable and alive. The lessons he had learned, the challenges he had faced, and the guidance he had received had transformed him. He was no longer running from life. He was part of it, fully engaged and aware. Lila settled beside him, her presence quiet but reassuring. "The frontier will continue to test you," she said softly. "It will challenge you in ways you can't imagine, but you've shown that you're ready. You can face what comes next, and you'll do it with strength and wisdom." Sam turned to her, feeling gratitude and respect beyond words. "Thank you, Lila, for everything. I've learned more than I could have ever imagined, and I feel, alive for the first time in years." She smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "That's the frontier," she said. "It changes people. It shows them who they truly are. And sometimes it brings people together who belong together." Sam felt a warmth in his chest he could not explain. Lila had been more than a guide. She had been a constant, a steady presence, someone who had seen his vulnerability, his mistakes, and his potential, and had chosen to walk beside him. In the wild, untamed land, she had claimed him, not in a controlling way, but as a partner, a companion, and a friend who trusted him and allowed him to grow. The days turned into weeks, and Sam and Lila continued their life in the clearing and the surrounding forest. They worked together, shared meals, and faced challenges side by side. Sam became skilled in the ways of the land, learning to read the signs of animals, navigate the terrain, and adapt to the ever-changing environment. Lila continued to guide him, but their relationship had grown into a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared experience. Sam reflected often on how much he had changed. The frontier had tested his patience, courage, and resilience. It had pushed him beyond the limits of what he thought he could endure. And through it all, Lila had been there, not as a master, but as a companion who believed in him, challenged him, and encouraged him to discover his own strength. One evening, as they sat by the fire watching the sunset, Sam realized that he no longer felt the restlessness that had driven him west. The journey that had begun with uncertainty and fear had transformed into a life full of purpose, connection, and hope. He had found a place where he belonged, a life that challenged and inspired him, and a companion who had helped him discover the man he could be. "I never thought I'd feel this way," he said quietly to Lila. "I thought the frontier would just be a place to survive, but it's more than that. It's a place to grow, to learn, and to belong." Lila nodded, her expression calm and warm. "That's the truth. The land teaches those who listen, and those who are willing to learn will find their place." "You found yours, Sam, and so have I." The fire crackled softly as night settled over the clearing. Sam felt a sense of peace he had never known. The frontier had tested him, guided him, and ultimately claimed him, not as a possession, but as part of its living, breathing world. And in that vast, untamed land, he had found someone who would walk beside him through whatever challenges lay ahead. He closed his eyes. The sounds of the forest, lulling him into sleep. The stars above shone brightly, and the wind whispered through the trees. Sam knew that life in the frontier would continue to bring challenges, lessons, and growth. But he no longer feared the unknown. He had survived, learned, and discovered the value of trust, perseverance, and partnership. And as he drifted into slumber, he realized something profound. He had not just survived the frontier. He had been transformed by it. He had been claimed not by force or circumstance, but by experience, growth, and the quiet, steady presence of someone who believed in him. The frontier had shown him that life was not just about escaping the past or enduring hardship. It was about discovering who he could be, facing challenges with courage, and finding connections that made the journey meaningful. For the first time in his life, Sam felt truly at home. By evening, the settlers had moved on, leaving the valley peaceful once again. Sam and Lila returned to their clearing, tired but enriched by the day's experiences. They tended to the fire, sharing a simple meal, and talked quietly about the lessons learned. Sam felt a sense of pride, confidence, and respect for the girl who had guided him so patiently and effectively. As night settled over the frontier, Sam reflected on the journey so far. He had arrived as a stranger, weary and unsure, seeking only work and shelter. Yet in a short time he had learned skills, gained confidence, and formed a quiet bond with a girl whose independence, courage, and knowledge had shown him a new way to see the world. The frontier was still harsh, unpredictable, and demanding, but he now understood that it was also a place of growth, opportunity, and discovery. Lying beneath the stars once more, Sam felt a quiet determination. The challenges ahead would be many, but he was no longer afraid. He had learned to observe, adapt, and respect the land. He had learned the importance of patience, persistence, and courage. And most importantly, he had begun to understand the value of trust, guidance, and partnership with someone who had chosen to walk beside him through the wild, untamed world of the frontier. He closed his eyes, the sounds of the night surrounding him, and drifted into sleep, ready for whatever the frontier would bring next. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the horizon, spilling golden light across the clearing where Sam had come to feel at home. Birds chirped cheerfully, and the forest seemed alive with possibility. Sam stretched his arms, feeling the soreness from days of hard work but also the strength he had gained. The frontier had been harsh and challenging, yet it had taught him more about himself than he could have imagined. It meant he had survived this far, against his own fears and the challenges of the journey. The night deepened, and the girl finally stood.
"I should go," she said, "but I'll check on you tomorrow."
"You might need guidance if you're going to survive here." He nodded again, unsure what to say. The fire of curiosity and wonder burned quietly inside him. He had expected nothing more than a cold night, a place to sleep, and perhaps some work the next day. Instead, he had encountered someone entirely unexpected, a girl whose spirit was as untamed as the frontier itself. She disappeared into the shadows of the trees, leaving him alone with his thoughts, the creek, and the vast, starlit sky. As he drifted back to sleep, he realized the frontier was already changing him. No longer was it just a place of survival. It was a place of discovery, of challenge, and perhaps of connection. In the wild lands where rules were few and courage mattered more than reputation, he had encountered something extraordinary. He did not know what the future would bring, but for the first time in a long while he felt a spark of hope and a sense that this vast, untamed world might have a place for him after all. The next morning, the young man, Sam, woke to the faint sound of birds singing and the soft rustle of leaves in the morning breeze. The sun had just started to climb over the hills, spilling golden light across the clearing. He stretched his arms, feeling stiff from sleeping under the stars. Last night's encounter with the frontier girl Lila lingered in his mind. Her eyes, sharp and confident, had unsettled him in a way he could not explain. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Most people in towns would have whispered, laughed, or judged. But she had simply observed, understood, and left him with a sense of both curiosity and unease. He rose quietly, careful not to disturb the small camp of animals grazing nearby.